Wow. Here's to life. Make it better. Everything that's worth getting better. Oh, good morning. Let me move a couple things out of the way here so I don't do the meditation again. Whoa. Okay. All right. Good morning. Good morning. So good to see you. It's always good to be here. It's always good to be here. This is where I started. I love it. So, what are you thinking about today's topic for discovery? Death is my advisor. It's a pretty powerful subject, yes? Maybe some of you are feeling a little bit fearful. You might be engaged in a little bit of avoidance, or maybe you're intrigued. Whatever it is, it's perfect for you, and time will tell, okay? All right. So why am I honored to be delivering this message today? I'm actually, to tell you the truth, I'm excited for a couple of reasons. One is that I have the opportunity to talk to a group, a community of like-minded people, spiritually minded, growing on their own path of enlightenment. That's not always the case with this subject, right? And also, because it's time to have a different conversation, to open up a different dialogue. And so I want to do that because we don't embrace every cycle of life. In fact, our culture denies death to an extent, and it doesn't embrace all of the cycles that we have in this life. So with that being said, we are introducing, everyone is introducing, this is way beyond me, a new dialogue about dying and death, because they are two different things. So I would imagine that you're here because you're intrigued, yes? Mm-hmm. Yes. Are you in? Yes. Everybody in? Okay, good, all right. So Margaret Mead said that when a baby is born, we rejoice. When there is a marriage, we celebrate. And when somebody dies, we act as if nothing happened. Now, I'm quite observant. And when I said this last week, I saw some looks on faces of people like, well, no, I never acted like anything didn't happen when my mom died or my dad died or my cousin died. I don't necessarily mean that. But I invite you to think about a time when you may have forgotten, has this ever happened to you, where you were thinking and all of a sudden you said, God, is so-and-so still alive? No, I think I thought that they died. Well, I don't know, but God, you can't pick up the phone and call somebody and say, is Uncle Sam still living? Right? And that's no fault of your own, but our culture moves us so quickly through the dying process to get to the other side of the funeral that we just get past it. We have to move past it without embracing it fully. So let's have our way with possibly the most spiritual event of our life, dying and death itself. You know, we spend the majority of our lives avoiding talking about death, the D word. In my circles, it's called the D word. And we also spend our adult life looking for purpose and meaning, finding our spiritual path of enlightenment, right? Well, ironically, only to find out that probably the most spiritual moment or moment of enlightenment, pure enlightenment, is death itself. What comes to your mind? How do you feel in your body when you hear me say death, a spiritual experience, as well as possibly the most enlightening experience you'll ever have? Just sit with that for a second. So through this series, Lifting the Veil, the spiritual truth about dying and death, we're going to explore many spiritual aspects about this imminent unfolding, this imminent experience that every one of us is going to have. And we're going to invite you to embrace the 4 aspects of your spiritual pain. I mentioned this last week briefly. You know, we walk this earth in joy and in pain. That's the truth. And we all have spiritual pain, no matter where we're at in our journey, no matter where we're at in our growth, no matter how excited we are about our spiritual growth. We all have spiritual pain. And we'll address the aspects of that from our purpose and meaning, why we're here, to our relatedness to ourself, in our relationships, our immediate and those farther out in the world, as we are learning to do right now in this energy, this time. That spiritual aspect of forgiveness of self and others. as well as our hope. How do we move through our relationships, our life with faith and hope? What does that look like for us? How does that unfold? And how do we work that in so that we have that hope? So that's going to be part of, in our series that we're going to be touching on all the time, because the truth is, the way we do one thing is the way we do everything. Think about that. The way you do one thing is the way you do everything. And if you shift one thing, just shift the consciousness, even 1% of something, it changes everything. It changes your conversations. They become inspiring, maybe even delicious. Your relationships, they shift, they change, usually for the better. Your careers might change. I mean, literally, you might change your career. Your prosperity, your abundance shifts its consciousness. So the way we do one thing is the way we do everything. The way we live is the way we die. We walk through this life with our spiritual aspects, our spiritual pain, and we die with that same spiritual pain. It's just accentuated. So we're going to discuss the myths and the truths, the fears, the enlightenments, the noise, and the silence. You're going to find yourself moving through your own personal journey of discovery and legacy. This series is going to give you an opportunity to find the impact of this subject. It's nurturing. But you're also going to have an opportunity to be open for discussion, experiential exercise, meditation, the opportunity to face, maybe lean into some of your own fears and doubts about yourself, about what's coming for you. I am delighted to introduce my co-facilitator, Heidi Simon. Stand up, Heidi. Some of you met her last week when we talked very briefly. Heidi is a very good friend. She is my co-facilitator. She's also my co-worker. She's the social worker for Minnesota Hospice. So we are going to move you through this series together. I think it's good. People aligned to do this topic. You're going to be intrigued and moved by the stories that we tell of our own personal hospice experiences in our lives, as well as those of our patients. So how did I come to be here today, talking about dying and death? Well, I'm going to share some of my own experiences with you, and I'm also going to talk to you, speak to how being in and with death and dying every day has changed my life forever. But before I do that, a little bit of background, because I love, there are new faces here. I love the new faces. So some of you who don't know me, again, I'm Deb Mechley. I'm a mother of 3 young men, grandmother of 9 beautiful children. I've been a member of Unity for about 14 years. I served as a chaplain for just about 5 years here. And I am the founder of Trust Your Vision Transformational Coaching for personal transformation and wellness. And I'm also one of the co-hosts of the Minnesota Hospice radio talk show that airs every Saturday at noon on AM 950, Progressive Radio. Heidi is also, and there are a couple of other co-hosts here in the audience today. So please check us out there. I was a nurse, OBGYN, for over 20 years, helping babies come into this world. And I'm now a spiritual care advisor for Minnesota Hospice for the spiritual care of our patients, families, and of our team. Our team is a pretty special group of people in that we see death for what it is. It is a part of living. It is about living. And we move through that without fail every day. When I worked in obstetrics, we delivered babies into this world, and my experience, quite honestly, made it very clear that these babies are not overzealous about coming into this energy. They really aren't. Thus, more cesareans, more inductions. That's another story, but that is true. And so now I midwife folks out of this world. You see, it's an eternal birthing process. We birth in, we birth out. We labor in, not only the mums, but us babies. The babies labor in. We have this gap of life that we do. Then we have the dying, and then the final stage of death. We birth out, and it is a labor as well. As an intuitive, I help people. I help people in end of life, guiding them with their own guides and angels, move to the next realm, the next best place. It's been my experience that leading this world, friends, is easier than coming in, and I would guess that's good news. Yes, but there is a truth, and the truth is that we know We are born at a cellular level, at a DNA level, we are born knowing how to die. Our bodies are this spectacular miracle that knows exactly what to do in that dying journey. And in fact, we are completely, authentically energetic during that time, which is why I believe, and from what I see and what I know, that that is the moment of enlightenment. So unfolding, think about how our lives unfold. Let me also say that, we may not understand why or how our lives are unfolding, but the truth is, it is unfolding on purpose all the time. Your purpose. You are embracing that whether you know it or not. Unfolding may be blind. And that's okay, because that's part of the human experience, is maybe not recognizing the unfolding. However, the more aware and mindful we become, the more sense the unfolding makes. And I'm going to tell you about my story. When I was a child, I had imaginary friends, that's what they called them. And I just thought everybody was like me. I thought they all had the same experience. And I used to play with different kids that weren't really in the neighborhood. And I used to get on the swing, and I would swing. And I remember on the third big swing, I would go up into this rainbow, and I would play with these kids. And there were elders there too, but they were old, but they were young. It's like they held this loving energy space, welcoming that newness, the energy of the children that are so open and accepting of whatever. So, I would tell my mom about my experiences, and she never poo-pooed me, but she just kind of said, okay, dear, I'll take it. And so one time, I was about 10 years old, and I overheard a conversation between my mom and some people that were over at our house. And my mom must have told this friend, Darlene, I'll never forget her name, I must have been 10. And she said to my mom, oh my gosh, you need to get her some help. That's just not okay. And I was listening to this, and the first thing that came to my mind, do you remember years and years ago when you used to watch the scary, what they called horror movies? They were usually in black and white, and they always had some kind of hospital insane asylum. That's what came to me immediately, and I was scared to death. And I said, I had to shut this off. I don't want to go away. I thought it was going to go away. It really did. And so I started shutting it off. But when you're a child, it's not easy, because we glow. It's like the halo, the glow around the candle flame. That's what the angels are attracted to. And that's what children are. They're open. They're glowing. They're welcoming. So I had to push them away and say, stop, please don't come. I think that they took care of me, because they started to stop, and it was fewer and fewer. So I was doing my thing, and I was going through school, and I was in high school, and I was 17 years old. And I never forget this day. I worked in a nursing home. In fact, I started working in the medical field when I was 15, and been there ever since. I was working in a nursing home, and I had this 4 to 12 shift, and I was running late, and I got there, and the time clock, it was 4:03, and I remember being bummed, because back then, if you were 1 minute late on a time clock, you were docked 15 on your paycheck, and I think I made like 3 1/4 an hour or something for what I did. And so, which was probably big money back then, because I'm not going to date myself, but it's a long time ago. So anyway, I was punching the time clock. It was 4:03, and I took the card and I put it up in the slot, and I saw my sister, Charlene, standing there in spirit. Well, I wasn't frightened, but it was odd for me, because I'd never had anybody show up to me living in spirit form. See, I just spent the weekend with her, babysitting my nephews. And so I was a little puzzled. And she's this happy-go-lucky, carefree, kind of nonchalant about life, And so, but she was kind of serious. She had a smile, but she was assertive and gentle, and she looked at me and she said, Debbie, don't ever forsake your gifts again. And she ended it with ever. And then she dissipated. And I was trying to figure this out. It felt a little odd to me. So I went about doing what I was doing, and I got called to the nurse's station, to the front desk. And my mom was on the phone, and she said, Debbie, Charlene just died in a car accident about 4 o'clock. So when she made her transition, she came to me, and that day, actually it wasn't that day, I was a little confused. A couple days later, at her funeral, I made an agreement. I made a new agreement. You know, we all come here. We made agreements, we can break them. I made a new agreement with her and with myself that I would open up again. So I did, but you know, I was a little lazy. You know, your intuition, that gift, it's a muscle. Like anything else, it has to be worked out. It has to be practiced and touched, you know, and nurtured every day. So I was going through high school and college and marriage and kids, but what I found was with every baby, my intuition heightened, my vibration increased. And it was so on purpose because there was no way to push that away. By my third child, Devin, and some of you know Devin, he was born very, very ill. But when he was in utero, I knew it. He had already told me he was sick and to be ready. So when he was born, I knew he was sick, but everyone thought he was fine. They told me I had postpartum blues. But he would look at me, and he would say, scream to me, Mama, figure it out. There's something really wrong with me. You have to figure it out. It took 6 weeks, and we did, and it turned out that he needed a liver transplant. And over time, I mean, there was a lot of illnesses and things on that journey. He had a transplant at age 5. Wonderful, he was given this wonderful gift of life. But it wasn't without its setbacks. So when Devin was about 8 years old, he developed something called post-lymphoma. When you get a transplant, you're immune suppressed, and you're more open up to other things. So, but with this, because he had been given this organ, there was going to be no radiation, no chemo, and we were so grateful for that because that's what I was going to buck up against. But it didn't happen. So one day I was talking to Devin, and I was telling him what we were going to do. There's going to be no more, there wasn't going to be surgeries and cutting and that kind of thing. But he was familiar with energy work and hands-on healing and prayer and lots of visualization. Lots of visualization to get him through before he had that transplant. So we talked about that's what we were going to do, and we were sitting in the living room, and it was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and the sun used to come through that room. It was very beautiful, golden sunlight would come as the sun was getting lower in the sky. And I was sitting on the couch, and he was kneeling at my feet. And I was telling him everything we're going to do, and I had this kind of probably this mom nurse thing going on, right? And he said, Mom. He said, it's okay. He said, I came here sick, so I didn't have to be here very long. He said, I'm waiting for you to be who you came here to be. And in that moment, I could no longer speak. I couldn't get, there were no words, but I was weeping. My shirt was wet. It was a silent weeping. And then he said to me, Mom, I took my T cells and I put them in bubbles of periwinkle and fuchsia. And I sprinkled them with gold dust of love and sent them out into the universe as love for somebody who needed more. Now I'm looking at him, and this is an 8-year-old truck, plane, train kid, right? So Spirit was moving this through him. And in the midst of him saying this light that was golden turned white. And you know how you can see the dust in your house in the light? It was all gold dust. And we sat there what felt like forever. And it felt like just like that. And then the light just left. And he looked at me without words. Speechless, without words, he said to me intuitively, I told you already. So he never wanted to talk about that again whenever I would bring it up. So when he was 11 years old, he needed another surgery. We'd had some issues and complications, and they needed to fix something. So at this point, it was over 40 surgeries, and I stopped journaling them. But I always sat out in the St. Mary's Peace Garden, which was at Mayo in Rochester. It was a beautiful garden. And, you know, St. Francis and the waterfalls and all the flowers. And I always felt peace there, and I'd say, just one more surgery, get us through one more. So I was sitting there, it was a hot day, it was in August, and my eyes were closed, and all of a sudden, and I could still hear, you know, the traffic going in the background, and that there was some movement around me. But I sat there, and I began to move away. I couldn't open my eyes. It was like that sleep when you wake up in the morning, and you go back to sleep, and you have that really, really vivid dream, but you can't open your eyes. You ever have those dreams when you're trying to wake up? And then I trusted. I just said, go ahead and go. I hesitated for a moment, but I was so curious. And so I kept moving toward this light. It was white. It had turned from, you know when you close your eyes and the sun is coming in and it's golden but it hurts? It no longer hurt. And it was white and it was brighter than anything I'd ever seen. And I kept on going. And the light itself started to take form. And in the form of this light was this incredible tree. It was like a grandmother oak, but all of its branches and veins were this vibrational liquid light. It was humming with light. And I kept moving toward it, and on it were these discs. And in my nursing background, I thought of them as like red blood cells, you know, like a donut, but they don't all go all the way through. And they were fuchsia. And they were hanging on this tree. And as I embraced what was happening, I was just in awe. And I realized that this big, huge, beautiful angel with this wingspan that went all the way around this tree was embracing this tree and me. And she looked at me and said, "You're here." And took my hand, and the way she took it was like this, into that disc. And I felt love like I can't even explain. I have felt so loved on this world and this life, and you couldn't even match it 1,000,000 times what that felt like. And in that moment, I felt like I was everything and nothing. Anything that had ever happened wasn't there. Anything that could wasn't there. There was no in, out, up, down, here, there. It was everything and nothing. It was the most incredible love. And I looked down, and there was this little figure sitting at my feet. And there was a white veil. And they looked up, and the veil fell off, and it was Devin. And he took my hand like E.T. And he said, "Mom, go." And he was kind of mad. "Go, be who you came here to be." And then just dissipated. And there I was sitting in the St. Mary's Peace Garden, dripping in sweat, because it was like 90 degrees. I ran in the hospital, and I went to the surgical floor, and I sat. And I had no idea. I knew that something very, very impactful had just happened to me. I didn't know what time it was. I didn't know how long I was waiting. And for days, actually, the time, there was no time. And the doctor came out, and he said, "We did this, this, and this. He's going to be okay." He said, "But I have to tell you that we lost him for just under 2 minutes." And I knew that Devin had brought me somewhere. And I remember not crying and thinking that he kind of thought that was a little odd. But as he left, I did weep. I went back outside and I wept. 3 days later, Devin and I were sitting in his bed and we were reading something, and I just said, "Devin, I gotta tell you about this vision that I had. I just tell you about this dream," but it wasn't a dream. I was awake, but I couldn't open my eyes, and I'm telling him about the light and the tree and the discs and the incredible angel and the feeling of love. And I said, and then I looked down, and he said, "Yeah, I know, Mom. I brought you in my dream." And in that moment, then he looked at me again and he said, "Now what?" You know, it was like, "I already told you this. Here I am again telling you this." So he did, again, he did not want to talk about it as he got older. It was like me back when I was 10, 11. "I don't want anybody to know that about me. Don't talk about that, Mom. Don't do any of that spiritual stuff." That woo-woo, right? So as time moved on, can you imagine having that experience? I mean, there are people, probably some in this room, who have had near-death experience. There are people who have them that don't speak to them. They don't even speak about it. They don't know how to. I wanted to, but I didn't know where to. I didn't know, I didn't know how to have that conversation. And I remember when Devin had told me, when he was about 8 years old, when he said, "I came here sick, so I didn't have to be here very long. I'm waiting for you to be who you're going to be." I spent that next year being afraid to grow, being afraid to move into my spirituality, being afraid to tackle it and express it and explore it. And I said one day here at the center to Audrey, Reverend Audrey, I told her I was crying, and I told her about this, and she looked at me and she said, well, Deb, there is no time. You better get busy. And so I did. And I remember there being no time. She told me that before the experience of me going into Devon's death experience and coming back through that. So for a long time, I'm like, God, Spirit, why? Why would you give me that? I don't know what to do with it. Who gets that? And wakes up every day thinking about that or wondering what to do with that. So 5 or 6 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, and then I did start talking about it in spiritual centers and created some talks around that. And then in 2012, my mom was diagnosed with lymphoma, leukemia actually, and she was given a year to live, and she stayed for 17 months. Her last 5 days, she said to me, it was a Friday night, and she said, I think you better call those people now. I'm ready. She meant hospice. I said, okay. She said, and it's going to be quick. And I said, well, what do you mean? And she said, days. So they came on Friday, and she left on Tuesday. It was the most incredible experience. My mom was conscious. She sipped coffee at 9 a.m. and died at 11:57 a.m. Not to say that she wasn't uncomfortable, but she had conscious death. So, but she kept saying to me that last 5 days, every day, several times a day, she'd say, Debbie, you gotta go do something in this hospice thing. And I said, Mom, I deliver babies. I can't even get my head around your hospice right now. She said, oh, you will. You will. The day after she made her transition, she came to me. And she's 4'11", short little Irish lady. She said, Debbie, what are you going to do now? What are you going to do with that ordination? What are you going to do with that? What are you going to do with that? That's how she would talk. She'd talk really quick, like I'm doing. And so I was, you know that hysterical laugh cry thing that we get, more women than men, but we get that kind of, we don't know whether we're laughing or crying. It's usually hormonal. But that day it was my mom. So I'm driving down the highway and my mom is, I can hear her talking to me. And I'm driving actually to Shoreview. My friend Kinshasa was going to do some healing work on me and move some of this grief through me. So I'm driving down the highway and I see this semi and it says Fairview Hospice on it. And I thought, well, that's kind of odd. It just was an odd thing for a semi, right? But it was right by me. So I get there, and Kinshasa's working on me, and I'm weeping and sobbing, and she says, Deb, take your time. I don't have any other clients after you. She said, you know, just do what you need to do. And I said, okay. She said, when we're done here, I'm going to go and midwife my friend to the light. I said, what? And she said, yeah, she's on hospice, and I'm going to help her walk to the light today. So I got in my car, driving down the road. I'm like, okay, Mom, I got it. But I'm going to wait for it to show up and unfold. That was me. It was like, I'm not going to go chase this thing. It's going to show up, right? 11 months to the day of my mom's transition was my first day in hospice. 11 equals 2, which means 1 foot in this world and 1 foot on the other side of the veil. And so as things unfold, you just don't know, right? I mean, there is no time. Think about 15, 16 years ago, that experience. Not to mention Devin choosing me as his parent to learn me something, right? So we get impatient in our human condition. We have to remember that we're spiritual beings having this human experience, and that time is irrelevant, and that things are unfolding, always unfolding for us. So it is my calling to walk people to the light, and but see how many years that it took for that to unfold. So here I am. My gift allows me to get glimpses of what my end-of-life patients are seeing. It allows me to be able to see those hands that are reaching out for them, those souls that are familiar and unfamiliar, those vapors of energy that are just waiting just for them, inviting them to dance, to fly, to be pure love, to be the truest form of who they are, to be whole, and to be home again. So join us to look at your light, at what's going to unfold for you, how you will choose for this unfolding. We die the way we live. The better part of that is that we can live better. We can die better. Is there such thing as a good death? Have you ever imagined a good death? Everything today unfolded. I didn't know what the daily word was about being guided, trusting, going to the heart, the music, unfolding, doing life better. If death was your advisor, if you thought about that imminent, how would you be living the gap? So in closing, in a meditation, Spirit gave me this beautiful quote that I'm putting her name and my name on. Embracing your mortality makes every moment extraordinary. It's your entire being. It quickens it. It opens you more than almost anything can. The more you bow to death, it turns out, the more you come alive. Death is an advocate for our aliveness. Death is our advisor. So forget what you were told before you get too old. And I will show you a garden that bursts into life after life after life after life. May the love, the light, and the transformation in me meet and greet. The love, the light, and the transformation as it will unfold for you. Namaste.